questions?
I'm confused. How does
We are too.
how does the technical amendment to 224 implement all this stuff that you said is causing confusion and bringing some provisions in?
Sure. So House Bill 194 ended early voting on the Friday before. Then House Bill 194 is now on hold, so that provision should be subject to the voters. House Bill 224 came along, and there was a technical correction made because one provision didn't match the provision in 194 with regard to that timeline. So now we're using that small technical fix to end voting, early voting on the Friday before Election Day, and to cut off voting rights for all Ohioans and cause massive voter confusion.
But I think all of you voted for this bill, and some of you are co-sponsors of it. The question someone in the public might ask was, didn't you read it? Didn't you know what you were voting on at the time? If it's it sounds like you're saying now it's a bad bill, you can't implement it.
We did all vote for House Bill 224 because we wanted to help military voters, and it was not our intention to have, this is the legislature. We are passing bills to help voters. It's not a game of Scrabble. When you take out major chunks of the bill, and the bill is now unreadable and incomprehensible. So that was none of our intent when we passed the bill as it's currently being implemented. We want to help military voters. That is certainly an admirable goal, and we all support that, but we don't want to hurt all of Ohio's voters by the way that this is being implemented.
So, I was going to say, it would be safe to say that the technical amendment harmonized 224 with language of 194. Now that 194 is on hold, all its harmony sections are there.
Yeah, the harmonizing sections don't make sense anymore. Plus, there's all sorts of different types of confusions because this bill, the statutory foundation for 224, has been yanked out. So now all those things I told you about, the absentee voting process, the provisional voting process, the voter registration process, it's all messed up now. In addition to those little sections that were harmonizing the bill, which is where this early voting problem comes up.
Secretary Husted issued an advisory. Is that enforceable on Board of Elections? It wasn't a directive.
And we think that that's an interesting choice. We've had some different opinions on what an advisory does. We had the Montgomery County prosecutor come out and say to his Board of Elections that this is advice given by the Secretary of State. It doesn't carry the same weight as a directive. So, I'm not sure he issued a directive, I think that same day or the day before, and chose to do this as an advisory. Perhaps he had an inkling that, boards, if they follow advisories or directives and they're wrong, are still subject to litigation. And he may have been seeing that and issuing a document that carries a different type of weight.
And are there boards of elections out there that are not following the advisory?
Well, and that's why I took the time, and I didn't mean to bore you all, but with what all the different boards are saying about the end of early voting, it looks like some of them are following it, some of them aren't. Some of them are clearly confused. Some are following parts of it as ending early voting, but then the military part is being left aside. So from what I can see from researching around the state, boards are doing all kinds of different things, and I view that as a real problem.
Is part of that reason possibly that they're just not updating their websites if things have changed?
That could be possible, but I think more and more voters check the website, before they figure out, okay, when's it open, or what day is election day, or where's my polling place. So I would think that boards try to keep their website updated, especially in these, last few weeks before the election.
Now, you were saying that this could hurt veterans. Tell me how.
This could hurt veterans in that, so early voting is cut off on Friday. For some, except in the advisory, it allows military voters to vote the 3 days before Election Day. But it doesn't lay out how that is to occur. So if a voter shows up on the Monday before Election Day, the Board of Elections, to vote, I mean, do they have to wear their uniform? Do they have to provide special military ID? There's no direction has been given on how to follow that standard. It also, certain boards of elections are saying the cutoff date is Friday, and they're apparently not following the advisory, which allows military voters those extra days. So, I think that there's multiple ways that this is hurting military voters, especially if we cut early voting off on Friday. That hurts all voters, including military voters.
What's your recourse if Secretary of State Husted said, no, I'm not changing it, it's going to stay this way? What's your recourse?
I think that there is a great potential for there to be lawsuits filed in this election and in the next election to try to rectify this serious problem.
And even if the referendum is successful and in the end Ohio voters reject House Bill 194, couldn't this still continue? I mean, could this still be an issue?
Yeah, I think that Secretary Husted has made this decision to cut off early voting despite 194, and I think that even if 194 goes down and this decision stays in place, we could be at risk of thwarting, the will of the voters next November.
So you think next November we could be in the situation where there wouldn't be early in-person statewide voting
on the 3 busiest days of early voting in person? I do, and that's why we're all here today, because we're very concerned about that problem.
What does that mean for Democrats? Do you guys have a lot of people who come to vote on those days? Is that a big voting weekend for you, or?
For everybody.
I would say, in one regard, that the early in-person voting is especially prevalent in our large urban centers. And we had huge voting turnout in Cleveland, early in-person voting turnout in Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. And I think that we have a higher makeup of Democratic voters in those areas. So this certainly does smell of some partisanship and of trying to suppress certain votes in those critical days of early voting. I was the director of the early voting center in Franklin County in the last presidential election, and by far our 3 busiest days were the Saturday, the Sunday, and the Monday before Election Day. Because people are getting energized and they want to go vote, or maybe they have something come up Tuesday and they don't find out about it weeks in advance, and they want to go vote on those days. And the heaviest numbers of people do, and that's what we're all concerned about.
You talked about litigation. Is that something that you would be able to do, or do you have to wait until somebody tries to show up on a Saturday to early vote and get turned away?
I'm not sure about the answer to that question. I have a feeling that there's several options for that, and I think that those are being pursued and looked at very carefully right now.
Is it something you can have done in order to affect this weekend?
I think it's a possibility, but I'm not quite sure, so I don't want to answer that definitively.
Would that have to go through a county police court first, or could you take that directly to the court right away, or where would that get federal court?
I think it would be the trial court level of either the federal or the state court. So in the common pleas court or federal district court. I think. I can do a little research and certainly follow up with you on kind of what the possibilities are there.
And if you were to try to do something legally to make it so that people could vote this weekend, when would you be doing that? I mean, you've only got a couple days left.
Yeah, time is running out. I mean, that's why we're here today to call on Husted one more time to try to work with him to do the right thing here. And we'll have to evaluate our options after this, this press conference and see where we are and where we can go to open the polls to everyone.